So we're back. It's Justice for All. We're on our last hour here. We're here with Sergeant Adam Plantinga, and he's written 400 Things Cops Know, Street Smart Lessons from a Veteran Patrolman's. Book's available on Amazon and in Barnes & Noble, and it's been a great interview so far for the last hour. Cops can make a stop. You know, when I was it's hard anymore as a defense lawyer, Adam, to get a judge to throw out a probable cause anymore. That the stop was not appropriate. Used to be, you know, we could go in and, the officer did not have probable cause for the stop. But cops now are so trained. Supreme Court has backed them up that if there's any traffic violation of any kind, even if it's a license plate tag, license plate light out, or as you mentioned, front license gone from the car, you can make the stop, even though that's not the main reason for the stop. It's really a pretext stop, totally legal. And you make these all the time, don't you?
Yeah, you do, and you're right. As a defense attorney, you've got your work cut out for you because there's just so many ways you can stop a car. I mean, the light on the license plate that illuminates it is often burned out. I mean, when's the last time you checked yours? It's just one of those things where, if you have some fuzzy dice hanging from your mirror, that can be obstructed view. If you even roll a little bit through a stop sign, there's lots of ammunition out there.
Yeah, I haven't won a probable cause stop in quite a while, unless the officer just was very untrained and unable to present his case properly in court, which occasionally happens, but for the most part, they have the right to pull people over. Have you done a lot of DUI arrests in your career?
I did. I think I probably did a lot more in Milwaukee, which is, I love that town, but it is a beer-soaked town. People are driving around drunk at 9 in the morning, so I did a lot there.
Well, they even named the baseball team after come on.
Right, yeah, you kind of, maybe some of that you sort of expect, but yeah, I did a fair amount of drunk driving stops, and, it's one of those things where as soon as you walk up to the car, you have a pretty good idea that, the way the stop's going to go, because generally speaking, you'll start to smell it as soon as they roll down the window.
What do you think about, you write an article about 28 things cops know about booze and drugs. And I say this lots. If it weren't for alcohol, I'd be out of a job as a criminal defense attorney. Half of my cases, I would guess, are something having to do with somebody drinking. Maybe I don't know what the percentage is, but certainly it's high.
Oh yeah, I mean, Homer Simpson, the great sage that he is, said that alcohol is the cause of and the solution for all of life's problems. And if you somehow were able to eliminate alcohol from this planet, I think a lot of cops would be out of jobs. You have, generally speaking, reasonable people who drink and make awful decisions, and you have awful people who drink and make even more awful decisions. So it's a running theme.
Yeah. What do you think about the war on drugs? You talk a lot about drugs in your book. We've had a war on terrorism now for 10 years or 13 years now. We've got this war on drugs that's been going on since I was in high school. And you're a police officer on the front line every day in this war on drugs. What do you think about the legalization of drugs, or how do you come down on this whole issue?
Excuse me. Well, I get the arguments for it, drug legalization, and they're made by some pretty intelligent people. I guess the argument is that drug war can't be won, and it's it's a public health issue, not a criminal issue, and we're spending all this money on the war on drugs, and drug use is, depending on who you listen to, is still steady and maybe even rising. I was listening to a guy who was featured on a cop I really like, a former cop named Peter Moskis. He's got a blog called Cop in the Hood, and he featured a speaker who was saying, look, you can't even keep drugs out of prison. Isn't it better to have it, controlled and regulated and taxed? And, the hope would be that would sort of stem the violence associated with the illegal drug market. I get all those arguments. That being said, there's some part of me that thinks that, me and 100 guys that think like me could really take back some of these drug corners. maybe that's just pure fantasy. Maybe that's the same fantasy that I entertain, that I'll be shooting hoops in some gym and a NBA scout will say, hey, look at this guy. He's really something. Maybe we should sign him to a 10-day contract. But I just can't buy into it. I can't wrap my head around it. I mean, I think one of the big questions is, and maybe no one knows the answer to this question, but if you legalize drugs, I'm not going to start just shooting up heroin because I'm a reasonable person. I know how devastating heroin is. But what about a teenager who may not even have entertained that before? Are they going to start shooting up? Are my daughters going to start using? I don't know. Maybe that's unknowable, but that really gives me a moment of pause.
Well, I love the analogy to getting that 10-day contract. It does mean that hope springs eternal, doesn't it? 100 guys like you might take back that corner. That's why you're doing what you're doing. So that's inspiring that you still believe that. And I think you're probably correct. I think that if we did legalize and make it would be even more available and much cheaper, and it would take some of the crime element off the street with the guns and all of that. But then you would have so many people ravaged by addiction. I'm not sure it's an experiment we would want to take.
Well, right, yeah, and I guess maybe just a couple more things I'd like to say about that. In San Francisco, where marijuana is essentially legal, you still have you have all these dispensaries where you can legally get marijuana, but you still have street corner dealers who are selling it, and people are still buying it, and some of these dealers have guns. So that hasn't automatically sort of taken the violent element off the table. But I think a lot of street cops, they see the drug war as kind of a losing war, but you're still sort of waging it. You're just kind of waging it as nobly as you can.
Yeah, just stem the tide, like the little Dutch boy putting his finger in the dike and just trying to. It's one of those wars that we're probably never going to win, but you have to keep fighting it.
Yeah, you sort of go down swinging, I suppose.
What do you think about cameras? There's a lot of talk about putting cameras on cops. Have you got one on you now or on your patrolman?
In San Francisco, it hasn't quite happened yet, but it's coming. They're still sort of, I think, putting the finishing touches on policy, and I think sooner than later, most, if not all, street cops are going to have cameras.
I think it's really a great thing. Every DUI case I ever get now, there's of course a hood cam that has the arrest right there. Sure does make it easy for law enforcement. It's a lot of people think it's going to keep law enforcement honest, but I think it's going to keep the citizens honest. If they know they're on a camera, they're not going to be wanting to fight with you as much. That would be the hope, that it would protect officers or as much or more than the citizenry.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think, ideally it's best for both people. You have cops sort of on their best behavior because they know they're being recorded. And, hopefully those recordings will just show sort of the police's, their proper actions. One of the wrinkles in the whole recording issue is whether police officers will be allowed to view the footage after they make an arrest, for instance. And there's some people that think that they should, and some say they shouldn't, because it would maybe sort of color their view of what actually happened.
I'm going to move on to another topic, Chapter 13. I noticed that after you did your little bit, your short stint in Vice, that one of your fellow officers said that you were the worst Vice cop that he'd ever had the experience to work with, or something. I'm sorry, it wasn't said in quite that way. You worked Vice, the prostitution. Tell us about that. It's kind of a funny part of your book.
Yeah, no, that's right. He did say I was maybe the worst he'd ever seen. It was not maybe a natural fit for me. I'm a preacher's kid. I tend to keep it pretty PG rated. And when I was told there was this opportunity, I was under the impression it'd be much more me sort of as what we call a jump out guy, where we're arresting the Johns. But it turns out there are two parts to it. We were arresting the Johns, but we were also posing as Johns and driving around and trying to pick up prostitutes. And Yeah, it's just so depressing.
It was just, you just talk about just how creepy it was and just how, and once again, it was another, if you've just joined us, I'm George Yates, and every Saturday I meet with some very interesting people around the country and world even, and I'm here with Sergeant Adam Plantinga, who's written this great book called 400 Things Cops Know. And it's got laugh out loud moments in this book. But I think the biggest, one of my favorite parts was when you were talking about the hot looking police woman who's posing as the prostitute. And no prostitute, a real prostitute, ever looks quite as hot and quite as good as the police officer that's posing as a prostitute. She's got actually, a full set of teeth. Her hair is coiffed perfectly. And, and you talk about how any John in the world driving along, seeing her, would not know she is a police officer. Tell us about that. I mean, I don't know if I can do it justice, but your book is great.
No, I mean, right. I mean, and we're talking about, street prostitution. The girls that are out on the corner selling themselves, most of them are they're drug addicts. They're doing what they're doing not because they enjoy having sex with strangers, but because it supports their habit. And they're sort of deep into street life. They've got greasy hair. Some of them have lice. They twitch. They look like they're diseased. And you'll have Johns that are still picking these gals up and exchanging money for sex. And it's just amazing that some of the police officers that we've used, who tend to be sort of young, attractive women who look like maybe they just went on a 5-mile run that morning, are still roping these guys in. I mean, they they just found the one street hooker in the whole city who doesn't look like she's a drug addict and has nice teeth and sort of good hair, and maybe they're thinking in their mind, hey, jackpot, I finally found her. But then the handcuffs go on. They realize I'm an idiot.
Well, and you mentioned, and a lot of people will kind of think, well, what's so wrong with prostitution? It's a victimless crime. You've got this woman who's willing to sell her body, and here's this man that's willing to buy it. So what's the problem with it? But you do mention in your book, and I know it's a problem everywhere, that the areas where the red light district, if you want to call it, of any city, because of the nature of the prostitution that's going on, it drives down property values. It's the whole broken window philosophy to the max, right? And if you clean up prostitution areas, you're going to clean up the whole neighborhood.
Well, yeah, and I think if you have people that are saying, prostitution is a victimless crime, and law enforcement should direct their efforts elsewhere. I mean, I get that. It's in the big scope of things, it's not as high a priority as violent street robberies, for instance, but. Think how you'd feel as a homeowner if you have prostitutes turning tricks in your backyard and your kids are playing in the yard, and there's used condoms out there and needles, and to say nothing of the fact that a lot of these Johns end up walking into robberies because the prostitution, the girls are setting them up for robberies. So it's a big quality of life issue.
Yeah, tell me, you've had a number of domestic violence calls in your career.
Yeah, it's. I think no matter where you're a cop, that's always going to occupy a fair amount of your patrol time.
Tell us about some of your experiences doing domestic violence calls.
I think if you talk to a lot of cops who have been involved in shoot or don't shoot situations, a lot of those will stem from domestic violence, because it is such a volatile situation you're entering, where passions are running really high.
Alcohol is almost always in the mix.
Oh, yeah, alcohol, drugs, and you're entering a home where there's just so many things that can be used as a weapon. A lot of DVs end up in the kitchen where you have knives and pots and pans that can be used as a weapon against you or against the victim, even hot coffee. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes you'll make an arrest and say the other half, the spouse, who's not always but often female, she'll turn on you because now she sees her man in handcuffs, and now she becomes another person you have to sort of deal with. So it's a sort of a multifaceted societal ill, and it can really test your mettle.
You talk about other cops. You have a chapter on what you know about other cops. What do you have to say about your coworkers and other police officers that you've worked with in the past?
You know, I probably said this before, but I love cops. Excuse me. Some of the best people I know are cops, but we don't always get it right. And excuse me 1 second. I got to take a little water here.
Go ahead.
And one of the things I wanted to do with this book is, you know, not kind of give a sanitized version of cops. We're not always out there sort of the yes sir, no ma'am. Some of us are a little sort of hard-bitten, and there's things that we do that we sometimes we shouldn't do. So I wanted to kind of present the good with the bad. You know, as I say in the foreword to the book, sometimes cops are better than people think, and sometimes we're worse, and sometimes we're just different.
How do you you mentioned that some cops are gripers and complainers, and yet you also talk about how so many of them, and you've got cops that you were talking about the cop on the beat and the wife on the beat. What's that all about?
The beat wife.
The beat wife, yeah. Did you ever know any cops that had a beat wife?
I have. Their names shall, of course, remain nameless. But
what is a beat wife for our listeners?
A beat wife is you have a police officer who is most often married, but he may have a woman in one of the neighborhood that he polices that he sometimes has dalliances with. So I like to think it's more so something that happened years ago, but it still happens now, maybe not quite as much.
Just like he's like the milkman. The police officer's the milkman, or the greengrocer that comes around, and he's the officer on the beat.
Yeah, and it's of course it's not okay. I mean, if you have someone on duty, you need to be policing and performing your police tasks, not get involved with the ladies in the neighborhood. But again, it's one of those truths about law enforcement, so I wanted to represent it.
Oh, you say in your book, once in a while there'll be a call of an indecent exposure in an alley or in a parked car, and it'll turn out to be two police officers having sex.
Right, and then the follow-up is, are they married? Yes, but not to each other.
Well, that goes on in the department probably just like it goes on in every other workplace. That's probably not that. I'm sure nobody would really be surprised by that happening.
Right. I mean, exactly. Cops are people, and the same things happen to us as happen to everybody else.
Right. So when this book is 400 Things Cops Know, now how'd you come up with the number 400 Things Cops Know for this book? Why not 500? Why not 250 or 400? Nice round number.
Well, it's a bit arbitrary. When I originally wrote it was just things cops should know, and I talked to some agents and editors who said, "Hey, people love lists." So I ended up. They said, "Why don't you count up how many you have, and just try to make it a nice round number?" So I did that, and I came up with, I don't know, maybe 408 things, and 8 of them weren't that good anyway, so I just lopped them off, and there's your 400.
Well, it's a great book. If you've just joined us, this is Justice for All. I'm George Yates, and we've been talking with Sergeant Adam Plantinga, who's written the book 400 Things That Cops Know. Right before we go to our little break here, I do want to. You have a great section in here on chases, and now of all of the things that cops do, probably nothing is cooler for us out here in the street or watching on TV or watching the movies than chases. I mean, it's in every movie, right? I mean, Blues Brothers on down, they got to have the chase. And it sounds like from your book, you've been in a lot of chases.
Yeah, I've been in my fair share.
And you get on, and you talk about chases on foot, where you're in uniform and you're chasing somebody down in uniform on a hot night. You talk about chases when you're in a car and you're going after somebody in a car. So we can have some fun here with some police chases. Tell about chasing somebody on foot. What's that all about? You must be a pretty fit guy. You sound like you were an athlete. You talk about basketball and all that. So do you pride yourself on your fitness and so you can outrun your typical suspect?
I'm 41 now. When I was 31, I think I was catching a lot more guys. I think it's every street cop's duty to stay in reasonable shape. So I try to hit the gym as much as possible. You don't want to, lose a fight or not catch a guy just because you've,
What about donuts? But what about donuts?
Well, I'm way too high class for that. I eat scones instead.
Okay, well, do cops still eat donuts?
They do. I think a lot of that stems from, I think the whole donut thing came from, especially in years past, cops working the midnight shift, if they wanted to get something to eat, the only places that were open were these 24-hour donut joints. So cops and donuts got linked together. But, hey, cops are people. People like donuts. Cops like donuts. I mean, what's not to like?
I come into the studio at about 1:30 to get ready to do my show here, and I don't know who it is that leaves the donuts here. Do you? Who leaves those donuts? But anyway, in fact, nobody left me donuts today, dude. I never eat donuts, but here someone leaves me a couple. There's a couple of donuts. Now, what do? I eat them. They're too good.
Not?
So yeah, if you're hungry and you're on a midnight shift, and you're trying to stay awake, and you had a long day, and you're working some overtime, and you're drinking coffee, and you need a place to go, and there's the donut shop, and there are the donuts. It's got a little sugar in them, and why not? Keeps you going, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's that sweet servant's call of the donut. It beckons to you, and sometimes you yield to it. That's
awesome, because it's probably the number one funny thing about cops, isn't it? Is donuts.
People say it all the time. One of I think the favorite sort of chants of protesters is the whole, bad cop, no donut. It's kind of funny the first few times you hear it, but after a while it gets a little played out. I'd love it if they came up with some new material.
Well, anyway, but your book, great the way you go in and you do take quotes from folks like Homer Simpson on alcohol and booze and drugs and everything else. But talking about chases, one of your favorite goals in life is when you chase somebody down that he pukes first?
Right. He pukes and you hold down your puke. You take some satisfaction from that.
And that really just kind of struck me, that, gosh, I didn't realize it, that cops have to give chase, but they do, don't they? All the time. You got somebody that might be there and he runs, and what are you going to do? You got to chase him, right?
You do, and one of the factors you have going against you is you're wearing a duty belt that has all sorts of gizmos on it. You have your handgun, your baton, your cuffs, your radio. So you may have an extra 20 pounds kind of weighing you down. So that's one of the things you have going against you. And they also train you that if you see the bad guy disappear around a corner, you don't necessarily want to blindly charge around that corner after the suspect, because there have been suspects in the past who have stopped and laid in wait for the cop, and when the cop has gone around the corner, they've shot the officer. So you have to look at it sort of tactically, and you can do a lot with your radio, giving a suspect's direction of travel so your fellow officers can kind of put down sort of a grid and move in on them.
Yeah. I mean, be smart about it, especially, too, depending upon the type of crime it might be. I mean, you're not going to, if it's some routine little burglary in the neighborhood and some juvenile running, you giving chase, you might want to say, let's just make the call and not take any chances. Maybe he's got a sawed-off shotgun back there in that backyard that you're running into.
Yeah, and one of the right, but one of the sort of interesting things about chases is a lot of times you'll have a rough idea why a guy is running from you. I mean, maybe you know that Joe Schmo has a felony warrant, and you approach him, he starts taking off. Well, probably because he has a felony warrant. But sometimes you come upon people, and you try to stop them, and they'll take off, and it's the great unknown. I mean, maybe they're running because they have an expired license ticket for $100, and they don't want to pay it, or maybe they just killed somebody, and they're wanted for murder. So you have to treat everyone as potentially very dangerous.
Right. What about? We've got a little break here. We a couple of minutes. Maybe we'll come back then. Okay. Well, I want to talk about so these chases, and you talk a lot about foot chases, and you're running along, and you've got all these. I mean, I see cops in court, and they are just loaded down. You got the baton, you got the big old belt, you got the gun, you got the whole thing, and you're having to run. And those shoes don't look like you're not wearing Nikes, right? I mean, you're wearing like police shoes. I mean, it's not you're out there wearing your Reebok basketball shoes, right?
Yeah, and a lot of times it's boots. Sometimes you can kind of get the lightweight boots, but yeah, sometimes you're wearing some clunkers. So you'll see especially you have some 18-year-old kid who's got some wheels. You'll see that distance between you growing and growing. Sometimes, again, no one can outrun a radio. So sometimes the best you can do is put out a description of direction of travel, and one of your pals will get them.
Well, foot chases are not what we watch on the movies. We like to watch the car chases. So tell me about car chases. Have you been in any?
I have. I'd say a lot more so in Milwaukee than in San Francisco. The pursuit policy is a little different, more restrictive in San Francisco just because of the hills and the fact that it's a lot of real densely populated areas. But yeah, there's nothing that gets your adrenaline going as much as a chase. But again, they're incredibly dangerous. If you are going after a suspect and God forbid you hit a pedestrian, then you haven't done your job. So there's always that balancing act between trying to catch the bad guy and trying to reduce the risk to the public.
Right, and you talk about you have it down to a science about how fast a car can go, a police car can go, and still execute a right turn safely.
Right, I heard an instructor talking about that once in a class. There comes a point where, if you're a NASCAR driver, you might be able to take it at a certain speed, but beyond that, the car can't do what you're asking it to do. It's just you run up against the limits of physics.
And yet, when you see these chase scenes, it's always mind blowing when you watch the movie and you say, you mean that they're chasing this guy, and it looks like they've killed at least 20 other people in the car crashes that they have trying to catch this one guy that's running away. And they do it in the movies, but in real life, you have to give up the chase, don't you?
Well, you do. And, when you chase someone, there's always a supervisor who's monitoring. And it's their job to listen to how the chase is going, to factor in what the person's wanted for, and if they decide that the risk to the public is unreasonable, they'll terminate it. I mean, if you're about to rush into a school zone where a school's letting out, even if the guy's wanted for a violent felony, you can't do that. You have to weigh all those things.
Yeah, you say when you make a sharp right turn during pursuit driving, you can take it no faster than 15 to 22 miles an hour. If you do it any faster than that, then you're going to be sliding over in the other lane. You're going to be hitting somebody head on and maybe having a much more serious situation. So there's no way, 15 to 22 is not extremely fast, is it?
No, it's not. And that's without, that's with your foot off of the brake. But yeah, in Hollywood, they're doing a lot of fancy maneuvers. But, our police cars they're nothing special. They're just sort of big cars made in Detroit with some lights and sirens slapped on them. They don't have any superpowers.
Well, they don't, do they? And most people probably think that police cars are fast, don't they?
Yeah, I think people may think they're all sort of turbocharged and have these special abilities. But, sometimes I've been in a couple of chases where my transmission blew right in the middle of the chase, so I was out. So it's sort of discouraging.
So somebody riding around in a brand new, Dodge Charger, 400 Hemi, something really super fast, he's going to outrun you if he's got the open road. But you can radio ahead, I guess, I suppose. But if it's just you, they're going to outrun you, aren't they?
Yeah, a lot of times they will. A lot of times they're leaving you in the dust.
But then you've got backup if you can radio ahead and hopefully stop them that way. Who runs? Who generally is the subject of it? Who's going to actually ride away in a car, not pull over. I mean, what person is going to be so silly that they're not going to try to just, okay, you've lit them up. What percentage of people runs?
It's not real high, but if a lot of times you have people who have warrants will run. You have people that might have drugs or a gun in the car that may take off. And then sometimes you have people run for, the stupidest of reasons. You might have someone who, again, has a $100 unpaid traffic ticket, or they're driving because they have a suspended license. They don't want to get that ticket, so they make a run for it.
Yeah, but when that happens, you can go ahead and admit it to us. You're saying, "Oh yeah, this is cool," right?
There's a little bit. There's a little bit of the "oh yeah" factor, but I will say this. I think a lot of cops will tell you that probably the closest they've ever come to losing their life on the job has been in chases, because they're inherently dangerous. You're supposed to drive with due regard and slow for red lights, but the bad guy doesn't do any of that stuff. They're blowing through reds, and you tend to try to keep up, and there's a lot of near misses. So, you want to get the guy, but you also want to go home hopefully unmangled by a traffic accident.
Yeah, you've got 2 little children at home.
I do.
And I'm sure that for the same reason that anybody that's got little children at home, they find themselves in a compromised position where their life is at stake. Probably the first thing that goes through your mind is not so much yourself, but God, if I don't come home tonight, my kids are growing up without a dad.
Yeah, I mean, you take risks on the job. That's sort of part of the package. That's part of the deal. But you try to make them sort of intelligent and knowing risks. You don't, when you can avoid it, you don't charge headlong into danger. It's best to take a step back and try to assess the situation. Just tactically, that's a better way to go.
Yeah, but at the same time, you say that when you're assessing a partner, and you mentioned about, you got a section in your book where you talk about the lesbian, bisexual, gay, and transgender community. And, of course, you're in San Francisco, so I'm sure there are some LBGT people on the San Francisco Police Department. And you make a point about you don't really care about what their sexual orientation is. You care about will they fight?
Yeah, will they work and will they fight? And if the answer to those questions are yes, then you open the door and hop on in. Hopefully, you may not go to the same clubs in the evening, but you'll get along just fine.
So is that the sine qua non of a good cop? I mean, first of all, are you a worker and will you fight? Is that number 1 and 2 in terms of whether or not you're going to be a good cop?
I think that's right up there. You don't like working with lazy people, and you don't want to work with anyone who's going to sort of shy away from danger. And most cops are workers. Most cops will hold their ground in a fight, but there's enough of them that don't, where you really want to avoid it. That's not what you want. That's not the person you want in the car next to you.
Right. And you do mention fear, that you often are fearful, but you can't show it. Hello? Adam?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
You mentioned that often you're going to be in situations where, you're going to be afraid. There's going to be fear, but you can't show fear. Tell us how you go about doing that.
Sorry, I think the line that I'm on is losing some juice. Let me try to switch over real quick here.
All right. For those of you who've just joined us, this is George Yates, and our show is Justice for All. We've been here for the last hour and a half with Adam Plantinga. Why don't we just take a short break here? Is that a good time to take a break here, D? And we'll take a quick break here while we're working out some little technical difficulties with our guest today. He's the author of 400 Things Cops Know. This is Justice for All. We'll be right back.
If you want a perspective on Bible prophecy, want to know what the Bible predicts about national and world events, are these the last days that the prophets of old and Jesus warned us about? Tune in to Remnant Radio every weekday at noon, Wednesday at 1, Saturday at 10 a.m. We have thought-provoking questions and answers to them. Come to the true source and listen to the Word of God in the Bible. Check out our website at remnant-radio.org and click on the Bible study link. Again, remnant-radio.org, and get the answer.
Summit Christian Academy, a classical Christian school, is now enrolling for the 2015-2016 school year. From the earliest grades, Summit students are taught that there is truth in this world, and that truth is God's Word. Classes are taught from a biblical worldview and give students a solid foundation to stand on. Summit Christian Academy partners with parents to train students to develop critical thinking skills, offering a rigorous curriculum that builds confident students, educates and develops student leaders to reason well, persuasively communicate, and articulate their thoughts, ideas, and questions clearly. Summit Christian Academy's grammar school campus for K-4 through 6th grade is located in Newport News, and the upper school campus for grades 7 through 12 is located in Yorktown. Don't miss the Summit Christian Academy open houses, Tuesday, January 27th and Thursday, January 29th. To learn more about Summit's classical Christian education and how it benefits your child, visit scaschools.org.
RM Designs T-shirt printing and more is located in Smithfield, but serves all of Hampton Roads. They specialize in vinyl designed shirts, apparel, window stickers, cups, and other specialty gifts. They also have rhinestone and embroidery designed apparel, and they offer Pandora-style beads and hardware to create a one-of-a-kind piece of jewelry. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more caters to businesses, sports teams, churches, groups, and family reunions. They also offer a great fundraising package should you be in need of money for a special project. And they also do home parties if you and your friends would like to get together and make your own creations. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more can be reached at 757-255-9140. That's 757-255-9140. Email them at rmdesigns11@aol.com or find them on Facebook at RM Twisted Designs. You can also place orders directly off their store at storeenvy.com/RM Twisted Designs.
Okay, we're back with Justice for All. We got about 20 minutes to go here in our show today, and thank you for being with us. We're here with Adam Plantinga. He's a sergeant in the San Francisco Police Department, just written a book, 400 Things Cops Know. And now that you've been in investigations now, Sergeant Adam Plantinga, you what do you know about interrogations? Do you now that you're are you now doing that more now, investigations and going out and speaking to suspects? Hello?
Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
I can. Sorry, that was total amateur hour on my part. I just was having some phone trouble.
Okay. On interrogations, do you interview suspects now as more of a line of duty now since you've kind of off the street now for the last month or so?
Yeah, I do. I tend to talk to suspects in sort of general felonies, robberies, burglaries, carjackings, and it's a pretty interesting business.
What do cops know about interrogations? It's not in your book, but what do they know about getting statements and talking to suspects?
Well, you know, one of sort of the inherent challenge when you go into an interrogation is you're trying to sell the suspect on telling you that he committed a serious crime, and that can be kind of tough sometimes because you think, well, why would someone admit to that? But there's various sort of techniques that you can use as an investigator, and sometimes you just sort of present them with the evidence. You know, you say, hey, look, there's 3 witnesses that saw this. You're on crystal clear videotape. I know what happened. Why don't you just, tell me why? So you may try to offer them an out, if they're if this was done because they're financially desperate, maybe they don't have a job, maybe they have a drug problem, you can let them speak to that. But other times you have to sort of adopt a different tactic. Your hardened sort of felons don't often respond to sort of emotional pleas. They tend to just respond to facts. But if you get sort of sometimes a younger person who hasn't committed a lot of crimes, you can use some different tactics to try to open up and get them to talk.
We interviewed a fella earlier this year, Chris Simmons, and he was an interrogator at Abu Ghraib. He said that he got almost all of those terrorists to talk without torture or anything else. He said you don't have to torture them. He says you can just start talking to them. There's all kinds of reason or ways to you sort of have to use a different key to unlock each person. You find that that's true?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You have to know who you're talking to, and you don't want to sort of try to do a one-size-fits-all interrogation plan. You tailor it to the person. You look up their background, try to find out, a little bit about them. In a lot of interrogations, you start out just trying to get to know the person. Find out, where they go to school, what they grew up in the city. You set sort of a baseline, so they don't see you necessarily as someone who's just trying to get at them, but they see you as someone that's there to listen to them.
I noticed in your book you talk about snitches and snitching and that sort of thing. Do you have informants out in the field in certain kinds of investigations?
I have used informants. I'll tell you, using informants can be a maddening process. They'll give you some of the best information you'll ever get, but they're also very frustrating to work with because a lot of them are criminals themselves and can be sort of, they don't always return your phone calls.
They'll go right back to a life of crime of trying to be selling dope while they're trying to work for you at the same time.
Yeah, it gets complicated, and you have to take great pains to confirm the fact that they're giving you good information, because a lot of times you're using it as the basis for search warrants. But again, you get the best and the worst from informants.
You say that the best show on cops is The Wire.
Absolutely.
And, I used to watch that show years ago, and then I kind of fell off my radar screen. I've noticed lately they're doing all the reruns. I saw that the other day. I thought, you know what I ought to do? I ought to record this show, just put it on my DVR and just record the entire series and just start watching The Wire and just, find show number one and what was it on about 5 or 6 years, wasn't it?
It had, I want to say it had 4 or 5 seasons, but it's just magnificent television.
Yeah, inner city Baltimore.
Right. And the guy, the creator behind it is a guy named David Simon, who wrote one of the best police books I've ever read, called Homicide: A Year in the Killing Streets. And excuse me, he's just a guy who gets it.
So the guy that wrote the book Homicide: A Year on the Killing Streets is also the creator of The Wire?
Same guy.
Oh, I didn't know it was the same guy. Wow. So now, how long has this book been out? Homicide: A Year on. I saw that in your book. I said I need to get that. Homicide: A Year on the Killing Streets.
I want to say a while. I think it. I want to say at least maybe 10, 15 years.
Wow. And he was a reporter for the Baltimore Sun.
He was, and he sort of embedded himself with the homicide unit, and he's not a cop, but he seems to know more about cops than we know about ourselves. He's just a great writer. He's got great insights.
Right. Well, listen, you've been a cop now for 13 years. There's a lot of statistics nationwide that crime is down. Violent crime has been decreasing year over year now for, close to 20 years. Are you seeing that in San Francisco?
I think in terms of cities of its comparative size, San Francisco, especially when it comes to homicides, has a fairly low homicide rate. But the big picture figures I don't think sort of factor into your experience much as a patrol cop, because you just keep going to violent crime after violent crime.
Right.
There's not much of a dip in your mind in sort of your small sort of sector of the neighborhood. So.
Right. Yeah. So from your little microcosm, it's not evident. You have to look at it from a much larger perspective to see it.
Right.
Yeah, because the way you describe being a cop, it's just amazing. You talk about the constant. You're doing one call, and then you're going to another call, and then you're going to another call, and you have to triage those calls to some extent, don't you? I mean, what is the neighbor that's calling and saying, "Would you please have these people next door turn down their music?" They're not going to get the police at their house probably very quickly when there's someone saying, "Oh, there's a knife fight down on 13th Street."
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, all the calls get prioritized. So on a busy night, your neighbor's blasting music and you can't sleep and you got to go to work the next day. it may take 6 hours for the cops to get there. And, you see the cops knock on your door. Sometimes you'll wake the person up when you knock on their door. The original caller, and you think, you know what, I just got to sleep, and now you're waking me up knocking on my door to respond to my noise complaint. What's your problem? I mean, as a cop, you get that. I mean, you get the frustration. But you have to prioritize stuff. You got to go to the violent crimes first.
Well, it's pretty amazing that the cop is conscientious enough to actually show up. Now, is that some kind of policy that you actually had to at least say, well, we did show up even though it was late?
Yeah, I mean, if someone calls the police, they're entitled to an officer to come to their house.
Right.
So, and sometimes what our dispatchers will do is they'll call the caller back and say, look, I'm sorry, it's been a long wait. Do you still need an officer to come out? And the caller may say, no, you know what, forget it, don't worry about it. But if there's no indication that that's the case, then, you go and you knock on the door and you try to help them. Wow.
Well, listen, we've only got a few more minutes left. Is there anything else that you'd like to, I know that I've just been asking a lot of questions, but what would you like to say that I've on any subject that I haven't asked you about, Adam?
Well, we had talked earlier about cops' educational levels, and more cops being educated these days. Some of the best street cops that I've ever worked with haven't had a lick of education past high school. You don't have to have a college degree to be a competent, effective cop, but I do think it helps. I think that, a more educated police force can be a more effective police force, but there's no sort of rule that the more educated cops are the more effective ones.
It's certainly going to help you in advancement, right? I mean, if you want to move up the ranks and go from sergeant to lieutenant or captain or wherever. So many cops that I've known over the years, they've actually gone to some online schools or night school, and you'll find that on the job over the course of 10, 15 years, they've gotten themselves a bachelor's degree while they've been on the force.
Right, yeah, and I've seen some of that too. And it certainly can help in terms of in terms of promotion. I've worked with cops that have master's degrees. I've worked with cops that have PhDs, so they're out there.
Right. Well, so what's in your future?
I'd like to be a cop as long as they'll have me. I love the job. It feels like a good fit for me. And I think I'm halfway decent at it, or if I'm not, at least people have been too kind to come up and tell me that. So, yeah, San Francisco is a fascinating city to police, so I think I'll be here for a spell.
Are you going to have a sequel, this book that we've been talking about, 400 Things Cops Know? Are you going to write another one?
I'd love to write something else. In terms of what form that'll take, I'm not sure. I wrote a decent amount of 400 Things Cops Know before I had kids, and I've got two little ones now, so if I have sort of free time, I find myself often either taking them to the park or, picking Cheerios up off the floor. So I try to sneak some writing in when I can, but hard to say. If something comes, it may be a little further down the road.
Well, listen, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show today. It's been really fascinating.
Well, thanks for having me. I've listened to some of your other shows, and I know that a lot of times you've had subject matter experts on the show. I'm really not a subject matter expert in anything, with the possible exception of late 80s karate movies. But I appreciate you having me on, and hopefully I held up my end of things. Okay, great. Well, we're going to upload your show to YouTube, and then we'll be on our website. So in the future, you can download it or have your friends come and listen to it. And it was really great having you. Thanks a lot to Sergeant Adam Plantinga for coming on to our show today. Thanks, George. It was a real pleasure. All right, great. Okay, well, then we're going to go ahead and say goodbye to Adam, and we'll have just a few more minutes to wrap up. That was a pretty awesome show, right, D? I'm telling you what. So listen, I'd like to thank my engineer here, D. Thomas, and our producer, Greg Hall, for finding that very, very cool guest. As I was getting ready for this show, and I read this book, and it's called 400 Things Cops Know. It's on Amazon, and it's in Barnes & Noble. And when I read this book, I have a whole new respect. And I've been working with cops as a prosecutor
back in the 80s when I was a prosecutor in Virginia Beach, and then I've been a criminal defense lawyer for 25 years now. And I will say, you go into court and you see these cops. They're in court. They're whether it's traffic, whether it's misdemeanor appeals, whether they're about to testify in a felony case, and they're straight shooters. They are honest. They're hardworking, and you can go out. You can talk to them about the case. Cops will tell you where they have a strong case. They'll tell you where they have a weakness in their case, and then they'll come into court. They testify. You cross-examine them. You'll cross-examine them about the weaknesses in their case, and they're going to admit that there's some weaknesses here. They don't know the whole case. They're not going to shade the truth. I'm sure there are some police that will, but it's very rare. You don't see it very often because they do know that, bad news travels fast. And so if a police officer does ever come into court and not tell the exact truth about something, it would be getting around the courthouse real fast. And I think that everyone knows that because your reputation, your integrity, your honesty is everything in that business. And I think that Adam Plantinga in this show has shown that he's the kind of he's just a credit to the whole uniform of a police officer. If you read the book, you'll see and you'll have a whole new appreciation, and especially in this time of criticism of the police departments around the country with some of these protests and so on, the I Can't Breathe stuff going on in New York and the Ferguson, and we take a couple of isolated incidents and have a tendency to indict the whole institution. And when in fact you've got these guys out there and women out there, a lot of women too, who are doing a job where often people aren't really thanking them for what it is they do. They don't get full appreciation for it. They're in danger all the time, and all they're trying to do is get off their shift and go home to their families. And meanwhile, they're protecting the public, and they're trying to get the bad guys, as Adam Plantinga just said. So my hat's off to all the police out there that protect our freedom every day. And I thought that we covered a lot of subjects there. We talked about unions. There have been some criticism of police unions. I know that Scott Walker went after the police unions in Wisconsin. But there he was. I asked him about the union. He says, well, they're right there to protect you. If you get a bogus complaint from a citizen, there's the union there to help you. He covered a lot of great subjects. He tries to get the bad guy off the street, and so he does profiling, but he doesn't do profiling on racial grounds. He does it on what a criminal looks like. And officers, for those of you out there, you know that if you're driving down the road and you break the law in any way, you can be pulled over. And there's really nothing that can stop a police officer from pulling you over. And, of course, the slow roll through the stop sign is the number one. Nobody, even your mother, stops at a stop sign. So if you don't want to be stopped by a police officer, stop completely behind that stop sign. Come to a complete stop, because if you roll through it, it will be a violation of the law. He can pull you over. And, of course, if you're law-abiding, you have to worry about it. But if you're not, then it's going to be grounds for them to write you up for something more serious. I'd like to thank you all for showing up today and listening to the show. If you want to hear our and it was interesting, Adam had listened to some of our past shows, which is great. Yeah. We have a YouTube channel, which is Justice for All with George Yates. And, of course, you can go to my website, ghylaw.com, and we will upload this show to our website sometime today or tomorrow, and it will be available to listen to. If you didn't hear the show in its entirety, you can come back and listen to Sergeant Adam Plantinga and describe his book. So thank you for joining us. Next week, we will have another interesting guest from 2 to 4 on Justice for All. I'm George Yates saying goodbye now.
CBS News, I'm Pam Coulter. Boston bombing suspect Johar Tsarnaev will go on trial as scheduled next week. CBS's